You ready?
Ready.
The Planning and Zoning meeting for February 21st, 2018 will now come to order. Please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can we go through the roll call, please?
Chairman Williams,
Here.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Here.
Secretary Chambers,
Here.
Dr. Faison, Member Baker, Member Ritchie, Member Bobick, Member Noel Copeland,
Here.
School Board Member Hare.
Here.
Okay, and we have quorum. Next is approval of minutes for February 7th, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes from February 7, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must first fill out the oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath card contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of requests will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on an item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents you desire the commission to consider, they must be submitted as evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Staff, has all items been properly advertised?
Yes, they have, although I will say that we are going to pull item 9E, the ordinance relating to assembly uses, from this agenda. We're going to re-advertise that ordinance at a later date. So it'll be coming before you, just not tonight.
Okay. And has anybody on the board had the opportunity to speak to anybody in the public about the items coming before us or visited the sites before us?
No.
Okay. With that, if we will go to the first item of business.
Okay, item 9A starts on page 9 of your package. This is for street renaming number 1-2017 from Vector Space Boulevard to Riverfront Center Boulevard. A request has been made by the petitioner, Brent Shepard, to rename Vector Space Boulevard a public street between Columbia Boulevard, which is State Road 405, and Washington Avenue, which is U.S. Highway 1. Per Section 30-240 of the Land Development Regulations, staff mailed letters to all property owners abutting Vector Space Boulevard to provide notice of the public meetings. A map is attached which illustrates the street requested to be renamed, and that map is on page 22 of your packet. So this is in what is currently known as the Vector Space Industrial Park. They have renamed the park itself to Riverfront Center, and so now they're requesting that the street be renamed to reflect the renaming of the park itself. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
I don't see any questions, so we will open this to the public. Do we have any cards on this item?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll close it to the public. What is the commission's desire? Member Noel Copeland?
It looks like they've asked all the people that have offices there, and there's no objection.
Right.
So I think there's no objection.
Great. So we need a motion?
Correct.
Yes. So would you like to make a motion on this?
I would. I'd like to make a motion that we approve this.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Can we take a roll call on this, please?
Secretary Chambers,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Yes.
Member Baker,
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland,
Yes.
Chairman Williams.
Yes. Okay. Next item, please.
Okay, item 9B starts on page 23 of your packet. This is an ordinance modifying expiration dates for conditional use permits which meet specific criteria. Recently, a citizen requested that due to the slow economic recovery, conditional use permits be extended to permit previously extended conditional use permits to be given additional time to be constructed. The attached ordinance allows extensions for conditional use permits meeting specified criteria after receipt of a written request. Those specifics as to what a conditional use permit has to meet in order to be extended are on page 25 under letter C near the top of the page. It starts with continuation of 2009 real estate market conditions. As the summary said, this was generated by a citizen that has an active, that has a CUP that would fall under this category. And so that is the reason for this change. And with that, I will try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay.
What page are we on?
This is,
Number 25.
yeah, 25. Letter C is where you will see the strike through and underline. It's in red in your packet there.
Okay. I have a few questions. Member Baker?
Is this, from reading through this, it kind of sounded like a lot of this may be to do with seawalls?
No, it's not necessarily with seawalls. This is simply related to conditional use permits, which are a separate type of
Okay.
Permit.
Okay.
Is that it? Is that it?
That's all I have right now.
Pardon me?
That's it for right now.
Member Noel Copeland?
How many permits would be impacted by this?
I looked at a list that the community development director put together today. I know there's at least one. There potentially could be two that are affected by this. The citizen that came in to request this extension was the applicant for one of the conditional use permits that qualifies for this.
So it only impacts 2 permits, we think?
Based on
Or
what
out
I
there?
read through earlier today, yes. Because they have it's a very specific expiration date, and so there weren't all that many that would still fall under that. And so I know there's one, and I saw another one that potentially could. I didn't have time to follow up and see if that second one had expired or not based on these extensions.
So if this isn't extended, what would that person have to do? Would they have to just apply again, or what would their process be if this is not extended?
In this case, the conditional use permit that was granted, I think originally back in 2005, was under a code that has now been changed. So the conditional use permit that this citizen has is for additional building height within the shoreline mixed use zoning district, which is right along the waterfront. The code was subsequently changed a couple years after that CUP was granted to remove the possibility of a conditional use permit for height. So a different method would have to be approached in order to get the same level of height that was granted via that CUP.
So this person has a permit to build to a certain height, after which the zoning has been changed to not permit that height.
Correct, because it had stayed active since it was originally.
So it's grandfathered in, basically, and this is asking to extend the grandfathering in, even though so if we don't do this, that will expire, and that person will not be able to build at the height that they want to because the zoning's been changed.
Correct.
What's the height difference? Do you know?
I believe the maximum height was around 100 feet. Is that correct?
So everything was set at 50, and then you can go up to 100 feet.
Right.
And then it doesn't cover the top portion where you'd have ACs, and so you could go up to, let's say, 105, 106
But what was it
feet.
changed to?
I
Would have
can
been
get that
changed to
for
a
you in just a second.
maximum of, well, we had one that might have been 120, I don't know, roughly 100 feet though.
Right,
Everything
my-
is-
Yeah, my question is, it sounds like the zoning changed to pull it back after this was given. So what is it, if this expires, what would be the max height he could
50.
build?
The maximum building height in the shoreline mixed use zoning district now is 50 feet.
So the option for this would be to change zoning, come in for a new CUP?
The option for a CUP is no longer in the code for height. It would either have to be through a
Well,
variance.
you did say that, but I was thinking that it might have been specific to, so you're saying it's a variance change now?
No. The only way, let's say that this is not approved, The only way that they could exceed that 50-foot height limit in shoreline mixed use would be to seek a variance or potentially some other kind of development agreement or something like that to allow that
And
same
that's what I'm trying to
height.
figure out. If I went, let's say that I was the applicant and I said, look, I want to go to a planned development. In this particular, I think I know which one this is, but let's just say that I did. If I went with a planned development, what options would I have then
In this case,
to get there, to get to that 100-foot mark?
a straightforward plan development, as we have it written in our code, would not work for the CUP that I know is still active. The site's not big enough. It doesn't meet the minimum lot requirements. And so that's why, in this case, that particular development option as a planned development would not be possible because they don't meet the minimum requirements for that planned development.
Okay.
So that's why I referenced either seeking a variance or a development agreement would be another option for that.
If I may add a little bit of detail for this applicant that has approached the City Council. City Council had previously approved this CUP, and so that was something that they have the right to extend. And this particular application involves permits from the St. Johns River Water Management District. And there's been causes for delay due to the real estate conditions that were the section of the code that we're currently amending. And there's been additional changes to the proposed plan that has caused the owner and the applicant to have delays. And his statement to the St. Johns River Water Management District dated April 8th, 2016 is part of the history of this case. And he says that he needs to extend the permit with the St. Johns Water Management District in order to meet the requirements for the city of Titusville's extension. And that was based on comments by the then mayor at the time when the owner approached the council. So council's pretty involved in this property and this CUP. He continues by saying, the project received an extension to the conditional use permit from the city of Titusville. One of the conditions of approval was to set back the principal structure from the shoreline. This requires minor changes to the site plan. The changes will eliminate 2 parking spaces so the building can slide forward to US 1 and away from the Indian River. The total impervious area will be reduced with only minor changes to the stormwater management system. And that letter was sent to St. Johns River, which required additional review under their agency and ability to extend his permit that they have issued to him. So there is currently, is my understanding, that there is currently a St. Johns River water management permit for him to do this construction, but the CUP is a separate requirement that this ordinance would allow him to have in order to do the development that council has agreed with.
Is the height the only thing that's changed in the zoning for this property? Is there anything
I know
else
that's
that-
one of the things. To my knowledge, nothing else drastic, such as setbacks or anything like that, have changed. But I know that the height was, that possibility for additional height was changed.
Okay, thank you.
So you're getting the looks. But
I just couldn't hear the comments from the board.
Question. Seems to me that about 6, 7 years ago, on this same board we're all here, I think we came up with this before, and they wanted to make an extension, and it was like, we figured they had 4 years to do that CUP, and another year extension if they need it. And now I'm almost sure we all voted that was more than enough. And this is running along the same lines, right?
The ordinance that was previously heard by the commission, you are correct. It was it's been since I've been here, so I think it was about a couple years ago, that any new CUP, you are correct, has a 4-year time frame in order to be established with the possibility of a 1-year extension. The ordinance that you're considering right now would be affecting conditional use permits that would have expired between January 1st, 2014 and December 31st, 2014. So this is for a specific group of conditional use permits that would have been approved prior to the new ordinance that we have that establishes that 4-year time frame.
That would have been.
They would have already been
prior to.
right. They would have already been approved before you took action
Before we
on
put the,
before you put the 4-year. Previously, before that, it was only 2 years.
okay.
Member Baker?
I have one more question because, like Mr. Chambers, I may be getting things completely mixed up here, but was this the same one that they have not only been grandfathered in once, it's like they've been grandfathered in twice on this?
This has been extended previously, yes, by an ordinance that looked very similar to this about a year ago, yes.
Even longer than that? What was the one?
As well as by the state.
Yes.
Do what?
As well as by the state, right? Didn't the state come in and basically
They did. They
say,
offered a 2-year
blanket?
extension several years ago, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, they've been given numerous extensions then, and,
Correct. This CUP was originally approved, I think, in 2005 or 2006, so it's been going on now for over 10 years, yes.
okay.
Did it?
Yes, that's it, thank you.
All right, so let's do this real quick. Let's close this, or let's open this to the public. Is there any cards on this?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. And let's close it to the public. And I got a couple questions and comments. So, I mean, I've said this before. When this first came in, it was 2 years, correct? That was when, my recall in 2005, when we brought in the CUP, we expected them to break ground within 2 years. Now, in 2005, the market was at its heyday. Okay, it wasn't until 2007 that it started to have issues. Okay, so now fast forward 13 years. In my opinion, and I've said this before, a CUP, when we're approving the CUPs, I anticipate that the conditions are ripe. The applicant is coming before us and saying, I'm ready to do this. Now, 13 years has passed and the conditions are not ripe anymore because the codes change. Now, granted, I don't want to burden the applicant, but there's a time limit. I think, in my opinion, 13 years is too long. Now, if there's other options, I think the city should have another go at items like this to say, what are the political items have changed, the town has changed. You should have another stab at this to be able to say, hey, this is what's the conditions can be now, because roadways change, stormwaters change. I mean, there's a lot of factors that change. I've said this before when we come to development agreements. I totally disagree with having a development agreement for 30 years. And the CUP is no different because we need to be able to, I have to have that assurance when we have an applicant before us saying, this is what I want to do, and they have that true intent that they're going to do it. Now, I don't want to take anything away because I honestly don't know who this applicant is. I mean, I know I have a couple things in mind. And so when I'm saying this, I'm speaking as looking at a textual argument here saying this is what I believe the policy should be. So I'm not specifying anybody in particular because I honestly don't know who we're talking about. And it really wouldn't matter. So in my opinion, I don't agree with giving extensions so far out. That's just me. City Council will maybe feel totally different. And they're the ultimate authority that is going to make the decision. But I don't feel comfortable saying yes to something like this. You look like you had your finger on the button, wanted to say something.
For what it's worth, the particular application has a retroactive, this ordinance would provide a retroactive effect on the application, where an expiration date of 2016 would be extended to 2019, not 3 years from now, if that's what you're thinking. If you want to consider that in your decision, the expiration would be April 2019.
But that's because it's already expired.
It's
not valid
It's
currently.
arguable what the status is.
Okay.
So it's, I think that when you take CUPs and you extend them out and you extend them out, every time you extend them out, you expect within that time frame there to be breaking ground. Now, when they break ground, how long did they have to completion? Is it a year?
The way
It's actually longer than a year.
Well, the way the code is written now is that you get a CUP approved, and that use is supposed to be basically the construction should be done, the facility should have its certificate of occupancy, and the use should be underway within 4 years. If something happens and they're in the middle of construction when that 4-year mark hits, they do have the possibility of a 1-year extension if they're not halfway through a project and we say, sorry, you're too late. So there is a possibility for that 1-year extension because we understood that sometimes other permitting takes longer than our permitting. And that's speaking in terms of today if a new CUP came in. But yes, that is the intent, that within 4 years it would have been constructed and occupied and underway, basically.
I remember us talking about that before, and and I remember, I think I probably said something about being a year, and then I was basically educated on, well, no, it takes, it goes back and forth in development, and I concede, yes, it's understandable, but at the same time, 13 years is more than enough time to break ground. And the conditions have changed to where I don't believe that we have a down market in real estate, considering that we have all the apartments and houses that have been built here in Titusville since. Now, I would have liked to hear from the applicant, and so it's not like it would have been better to hear from him, but so I'm looking at it as from just a text and a policy standpoint, and that's my position. But that's just, as I always say, I'm one vote. And okay.
May I have a question?
Yeah, you were next.
Was this also the applicant that the property was based on submerged land originally, and that's why it was continually grandfathered in?
Not to my knowledge in this case, because the CUP was only based on the height of the building, not any kind of density calculation. So I don't think that this had anything to do with submerged lands rights.
Okay, thank you.
I think that was a go fish. Okay, not a bad joke. Vice Chairman Shavir.
Is there, I'm going to ask this, is there the distinct possibility that if we extend this, that it could be extended again?
There is that possibility that at the next time the expiration date comes due, the applicant always has the right to come back and ask City Council again for another extension if they would like. That's not a guarantee that it will be extended, but they certainly have the right to come back and ask City Council to consider that.
Is there any way that we could draw the line here and say will not happen again if we approve this, that this will be the last time that they get an extension?
No.
There's no way to control council from writing new code.
I'm just asking because this is like a merry-go-round, okay? I mean, it doesn't stop. So I don't see where we have a choice yet, because we could deny this, but if there is nothing in the code that says we can't formally end this extension process, I guess that's just the way it exists. Is that correct in the code? They can continually ask for extensions?
Well, that's not something that you can write into code. I mean, City Council has the ability to legislate as they see fit, and so even if something, and you've seen this before, even if something isn't in the code, they can certainly create new code to address various items, and so there's no way to create something that would prohibit another extension, because inevitably that code could just go back and be changed to allow another extension.
What you have before you tonight is a product that was submitted to the city by the applicant as a formal request for council to consider this ordinance and to adopt it to allow the property to be developed in the future under this code.
Thank you.
Okay. That is it. All right. So, yeah, and I can only think of 3 applications on shoreline mixed use that I recall that haven't been built, and I thought one of them changed to adult living facility. So anyway, what is the commission's desire on this? I need a motion.
I make a motion that we disapprove or not approve XX 2018.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we have a vote on this?
Member Noel Copeland,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Yes.
Member Baker,
Yes.
Secretary Chambers,
Yes.
Chairman Williams.
Yes. So hopefully the applicant will state their case. I know they will. They'll be at city council, but it would have been nice to have them here to explain and justify a little bit better.
Understood.
So I don't want to dismiss them because they weren't here, but it would have been easier to make a decision with their input.
I think the troubling thing is that they're not only asking for an extension, they're asking for the language to change that says they have to prove that they have a valid permit.
Yeah.
So they don't think they have a valid permit probably right now.
So thank you.
Okay, the next item, item 9C, starts on page 27 of your packet. This is for conditional use permit number 5-2017 for Titusville Point. This is to allow a convenience store in the community commercial zoning district, and this is located at the northeast corner of Cheney Highway and South Street. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to establish a convenience store with fuel pumps on 4 parcels totaling approximately 4.26 acres, located at the northeast corner of Cheney Highway and South Street. The proposed convenience store will be approximately 4,975 square feet and includes 16 fueling stations. In addition to the convenience store, this site is to be developed with a tire store that's approximately 7,434 square feet in size and an additional tenant retail building approximately 5,000 square feet in size. So the only thing that's part of this conditional use permit, just to make this clear, is the convenience store. That is what requires the conditional use in the community commercial zoning district. Staff is recommending approval of this request with one condition. The condition reads as follows: the approval of this conditional use permit shall not approve any variance or waiver from the land development regulations or technical manuals. The 4 ground signs illustrated on the conceptual plan exceed the maximum of 2 ground signs permitted in section 32-9 of the land development regulations. Additionally, the total 131 total parking spaces for the entire site illustrated on the concept plan exceeds the maximum of 88 parking spaces established by Section 9.16.4 of the Transportation Infrastructure Technical Manual. Any deviation from the land development regulations or technical manuals shall be required to be heard by the Board of Adjustment and Appeals or the Staff Level Development Review Committee. And after a conversation I had with the Vice Chairman earlier today, I provided an 11x17 printout of the proposed site. The area that you see within that blue shape there that I outlined, that's the area where the convenience store and the fueling pumps will be, and then the 2 areas with the pink-colored striping, those are the access points. So the access points will be shared by all of the buildings on this site, even though the convenience store is the only building or only use that is subject of this conditional use permit. And the reason that I provided that is just to illustrate how the site as a whole would work once this is developed. With that, I'll try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, let's do this real quick. Hold on. Let's open this to the public. Do we have cards on this?
No, sir.
Okay, let's close it to the public and to Secretary Chambers.
I got a question. A while back, that particular spot was, we thought we passed a thing that property belonged to Wawa. Is that who this is?
There was previously a CUP approved for a gas station. I believe that it was Wawa. I do not think that is the tenant of this. I don't know that the engineer has submitted any formal documents with the name of who the convenience store will be through on this property, but I do not believe that it's Wawa. We haven't heard that yet, so I can't confirm anything.
That's who owned that property, as far as.
Based on the plans that we had previously, yes, that is who was going to go in there, but we haven't received anything yet that has said what fuel or what retailer is going in
I
there.
thought that was just who they were courting, and then Wawa turned them down. Andy, you'll know.
I believe you're correct. That's who they were courting. We never really received anything official.
So I don't know. I still don't know who.
I will let you know
I'm
whenever
trying
we
to
know.
figure out, how come someone owns this property and then someone else asks for all these CUP changes?
The developer of the property is Frontier. I think they're called Frontier Development. And so they're actually just a developer. They're prepping the entire site. So for all three of those buildings that are on there, even though I don't think their intent is to own any of them, they're just preparing the site so that the buildings can be constructed on it. And that's why we don't have information on everyone that will be going into that site. So they know they want a convenience store there. We just don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't learn anything.
Member Baker.
Okay, I have, on page 32, I just want to, is this a typo? Under number 12, it says special requirements, and then the next full sentence starts off with schools in any zoning district.
That is a typo, yes. Thank you for
Okay.
catching that, actually.
Kind
I'll
of a
go back and
weird-
make sure that's not a typo in our code.
Yeah, kind of a weird typo for
Yes.
that. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure about that. And then back over on the drawing that you gave us, when we were looking at the possible Wawa coming in, one of the statements that was made was, just below that on the paper where you see that very awkward intersection where if you were heading north on 405 there,
Right.
and you would try to turn into Aldi area. Is that going to be redone so that people can get in and out of this?
That I don't know. That would be through, depending upon what FDOT requires, they may require them to adjust this site so that they can reconfigure that interchange there. Based on the plan you have in front of you, it doesn't look like they're going to reconfigure that that interchange there. Right. The entrance on this proposal is north of that, where you can turn left to go into Aldi and Lowe's there. So that could change. I know the site plan has changed some since they have originally submitted this request. But that's really kind of up to FDOT because that South Street is within their jurisdiction.
Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah. So it would just create an additional issue that's even worse.
And so I know I am familiar. I looked back at the plans that were previously approved, and so I don't know that FDOT won't make them go back and propose the same sort of thing. This is just, I think, what the engineer originally proposed, but it will have to go through the FDOT review before they can modify anything in the FDOT right of way. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Vice Chairman?
Has staff done any more research on the impact of that type of business there at that intersection in terms of the volume of traffic and ingress and egress, and has any engineering been done on that at all?
I don't know if we have received a traffic study at this point, but based on the number of uses here, I know that a traffic study will be required. The community development engineer, he will look at that, and the developer will have to submit a traffic study as part of this to make sure, and that's what really justifies the need for the turn lanes and other associated changes within the right-of-way that you see. I don't know what that traffic study has revealed, but it's reviewed by the community development engineer, not by myself.
So what we have here is just a preliminary, I mean, what exactly are we looking at here in terms of what we can expect?
So all you're looking at in this case is whether or not the proposed convenience store is acceptable in this layout within this zoning district, if it's appropriate in this zoning district at its location. So in this case, staff recommended approval, or is recommending approval, because it's not directly adjacent to residential. We don't think there'll be any negative impacts to the surrounding property owners in terms of nuisance issues such as noise or lighting or that sort of thing. Most of the other uses around here are of a very similar intensity and that sort of thing, so we didn't see any glaring issues that could not be dealt with through the site plan process. And so the site plan process takes a much more detailed look, and that's handled administratively, but it takes a much more detailed look at stormwater regulations, the traffic, those sorts of things, how vehicles and people can move in and out of this site. And so that's why I said that this site plan may change as far as what's being proposed in the DOT right-of-way after DOT takes a look at it and after the traffic study is reviewed and approved.
So, I mean, when I look at this, okay, I think of, wow, I mean, this is really going to have a tremendous impact at that intersection. And we already have Lowe's and Aldi's, and, you know, we have the Ford dealership down the street, and we have Tire Kingdom, and this is going to be like New Haven Boulevard, which is horrible. And so how do we navigate that? How do we study the real impact of what this business might bring to that intersection? I mean, we're talking about, you know, 4.5 acres almost, and you're talking about adding, this plan that you have here is adding more 88 parking spaces to what's already, I mean, how do we know what the impact is going to be? That's a terrible intersection right there. I mean, you have Walmart.
Sure.
I mean, you have Aldi's, you have Lowe's, you have Home Depot around the corner down, you know, half a mile down the road.
Right, and the real detail, as I said, comes from the traffic study. And a traffic study is required on any project that will generate more than 500 trips daily. So whether it's subdivision, commercial use, anything like that, any project that will develop more than 500 trips per day, vehicular trips, is required to have a certified engineer, traffic engineering firm, come up with a detailed plan of how many turning movements there'll be, where the cars are coming from, where they're going to, how they enter and exit the site. And so that level of detail is reviewed. It's just we don't present that as part of these conditional use permits. It's been reviewed by our engineer, I think at least once, and he hasn't come back with any glaring issues. And so that's why nothing was reported in our staff report as far in terms of traffic or anything of that nature. Well, all I can say at this point is, will there be additional trips in and out of there? Yes, but the exact impacts, I can't speak to that nature.
So this is a preliminary plan, and so when staff, I'm just a little bit confused. When staff looks at this, what is your input? I mean, don't you study the impact of that particular intersection?
We do, and in this case, we are somewhat limited because FDOT has the jurisdiction that controls both right-of-ways that this property fronts. If this property was fronting on a local street, we could certainly have more of a say as far as what happens to the intersection right there at Lowe's and Aldi and that sort of thing. But in this case, if FDOT approves the modifications that are shown here, for instance, or they require the applicant to modify them, we don't have a whole lot of say in that because FDOT are the ones that own the right-of-way, and it's under their control. It's not really up to us, in all honesty, to make the applicant rearrange their site or things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Secretary Chambers.
If, let's say, I remember, we already okayed that area for Wawa, like it is. And this is almost about the same. So we can't turn around and say no when we already said yes.
You would need to have a justification as to why you would be recommending denial if that is the direction that the council ultimately or the commission ultimately chooses to go.
That's strange. Okay.
Another question?
Yeah.
Okay.
When we had Wawa there, I couldn't find my paperwork on that, but are we saying here that we are increasing the parking spaces to 88 more as opposed to the original Wawa plan?
No, the review that staff conducted this time was completely absent of the review that was previously done for that conditional use permit. We have to review each CUP as it's applied for. And so in this case, that statement about parking was simply referring to the amount of parking that is proposed in that conceptual plan versus the maximum amount that our code actually allows for.
Okay.
And so that's where the difference is there, is that staff just wanted to note that what is proposed exceeds our code and will have to be modified and or granted some sort of waiver if the applicant chooses to do so.
Thank you.
Well, I was going to ask about that too, because I know that parking was modified and it was actually reduced in years past. So one of the impacts of that reduction is what I've seen is you go to a few restaurants here and you don't get parking, and it creates more of a dangerous. But I mean, this is something different. I mean, I'm looking at this as it's a preliminary plan. It can be modified. It's more of just looking at it. You know, we're just kind of looking at to say, okay, is it acceptable? And as Secretary Chambers brought up already, well, we've already approved something else there, and so it is a little bit more difficult to not approve something. But originally, when the first CUP came before us, even I questioned the traffic movement. I thought it would be very difficult because it's literally one way. But you know, I mean, hey, if they're willing to, it would be nice to see that developed. That's been a kind of, it's been an ugly corner, and even I would like to see something developed. And a gas station would be nice, a good competition as well. The area that they're putting that pond in, I believe that's kind of a marsh area. I only know that I put a sign there, so. But so you know, I mean, I think it would make the area look better.
Yeah, there's nothing there but weeds and trees.
You know, and I honestly, whoever does come in here, I wish them luck, and hopefully they can work with DOT. But if you look at Cumberland Farms, this was kind of a, maybe I'm comparing apples to oranges on this, but if you look at Cumberland Farms and the businesses that were before there, they had problems because they couldn't get good traffic flow. So they changed the configuration somewhat. DOT came in and kind of said, no, we don't think so. But the business is booming. I mean, I drive by there every day and the place is packed. I'm there at 5 in the morning and it's packed. I mean, it's not packed, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. It has more business in one day than the other business had in a week. And so, you know, it could be very successful. And I wish them luck. So, I'm sorry. Vice Chairman Shavir.
These signs that they're talking about here, increasing it, what's the story on that?
That's something that will have to be reviewed at a later date. That's just reviewed through a building permit. However, they spoke about proposing 4 ground signs. The code does not allow for that. So we've been in talks with the applicant, and if they choose to move forward with putting 4 ground signs on the property, they will have to get a variance or request a variance from the Board of Adjustment. We as staff have told them that we will not support a variance for that number of signs. And we went back and forth with them several times, and they finally accepted the fact that they'll have to go and request a variance at the Board of Adjustment if they want to pursue that number of signs.
Yeah, because that's going to look ugly. I don't care how new or how good it looks. That's just a little bit over the top. And I think that they need to reconsider that, and I would very much not like to see that put in place.
Is your microphone on?
I'm sorry. I would like very much not to see those 4 signs there. I think 2 is sufficient, especially on that location, for God's sake.
And staff has relayed that to them. That's what the code requires, and that would be our opinion as well, that they can co-locate their signs and get by with what the code allows on.
Thank you.
Member Baker.
I have a question for staff about the parking numbers, parking space numbers that you have. And this is just something that I'm not asking you necessarily to do anything about it for this or for anything else, but just a different point of view maybe that I have recently come across. My husband and I bought a travel trailer. Now that he's retired, of course, every retiree has to own a travel trailer, evidently. So we own one, and we've been going places and doing things. And it is very, very difficult to pull a trailer and pull into most places where you can get fuel, because there's no place to park. If you want to go to the bathroom, you are either going to take up the fueling spots for a period of time, or like in this case, if this were our choices, there would be no place to park because you can't pull all the way across the front of a building with something like that. And you wouldn't want to anyway, that's just rude. And so just as an aside, even though it may seem excessive, if they have extra spaces somewhere, with a grouping especially like this, I don't see an issue personally with adding extra spaces, because it does accommodate people, since this is right off 95. So it was just a point I wanted to bring up.
Okay. So we've opened this to the public and closed it to the public, hashed it about, and is there any other questions or comments from this board? Okay. Is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve CUP 5/2017
Okay. Is there a second? Oh, go ahead.
as written.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, got a couple seconds.
I have a question. Is that with staff recommendations?
Oh, yeah, but they're gonna follow, he just said that they were gonna follow them by step by step. The other thing that, not involved in right now, but they're gonna look at their site plan as they go along.
Well,
Make those
as
changes.
written with that condition, right? That's what we're saying.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can we take a vote on this, please?
Member Baker?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir?
Yes.
Secretary Chambers?
Yes,
Member Noel Copeland?
Yes.
Chairman Williams?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
You know, I expected this. I really said we're going to be here for a couple hours. I really did, But obviously, you guys didn't, because I don't see no water. So you guys thought we were going to.
Oh, see, Lori's not here and I forgot about it. See what?
Put that in Trevor's performance.
Yeah, right. There will be water next time. Okay, the next item, item 9D, starts on page 41 of your packet. This is an ordinance relating to the prohibition of shipping containers for residential use. On December 12, 2017, Council approved advisability to develop an ordinance regulating shipping containers for use as residential structures, directing staff to prohibit the use of these containers. The attached ordinance prohibits the use of shipping containers for any residential structure. And basically, the ordinance is very straightforward. It lists in several locations, basically, that a shipping container cannot be used for a residential unit. As the summary stated, this was a direction from City Council, and now this ordinance is before the Commission for your input and consideration so that it can be relayed to the City Council. If you have any questions,
Okay.
I'll be glad to answer.
So open this to the public. Got any cards on this?
No, sir.
Close this to the public. Member Noel Copeland.
This is separate than the other shipping container item we heard a month or so ago?
Correct. That was related to accessory structures, so that that ordinance was dealing with if someone wanted to purchase one of those to put in their backyard, basically to serve as just extra storage. Whereas this ordinance is referring to, I'm sure you've seen them, they're
Tiny house.
more or less tiny homes, yes, that people purchase these shipping containers and convert them into residential units. Actually, it goes beyond that. There's people that are building apartment buildings and things like that out of them as well. And so this would not just apply to single family, it would basically apply to any residential units that, that could be proposed. And it would prohibit them.
Okay. Member Baker.
Okay, so I would like to follow up with that and ask what the reasoning is behind that.
I think mainly this came about due to aesthetics. Typically when something like this, let's say someone takes 4 or 6 shipping containers, puts them together to create a single family house, most of the time the neighbors are upset about that because they don't feel that a home of that style or of those materials fit in with your typical single family neighborhood. And I think that for consistency purposes and aesthetics, that is the direction of council, was to basically protect the existing character of neighborhoods by not allowing these sorts of structures to go in and be kind of placed in, a vacant lot here or there where it may not match up with the character of the existing neighborhood.
Could I put a prefab trailer on that same lot if it didn't fit into the neighborhood?
More than likely not.
So I
Mobile home.
couldn't put a modular home, prefabricated home?
A prefabricated
mobile
home that meets the Florida Building Code, you could.
Okay.
But a mobile home that's registered with the DOT, you cannot. There's 2 specific zoning districts within the city that mobile homes can be located in, and typically those zonings are where an existing mobile home park already is.
So if this goes through as written, could a shipping container home be put where a mobile home is permitted?
No, it could not. This just prohibits them across the board.
So I would agree. I would disagree with that.
My thoughts on this, I mean, I've seen some of the articles on new aged apartment living. I know you guys have had to see this. They look pretty cool. And they really did. And I thought to myself, obviously it wouldn't work here, but what if they were on a residential estate, away from everybody, a minimum of 5 acres? Or I'm just, there's possibilities. And to be quite honest, we have people in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait that actually live in these things, that we send people overseas, and this is what you have people living in. Sure. And we do this.
I did just want to clarify, the direction that staff received from council was just to prohibit them, so that's why the ordinance is written as is. However, if you feel that there could be exceptions to that, the commission is certainly more than capable to make that recommendation, and it will be transmitted to the council for their consideration.
Yeah, I disagree with a full-out ban. I think if they were allowed where a mobile home structure is allowed, that would more fit in. And also, like you're saying, if it's on a 5-acre, property where you don't have a close neighbor to be offended by what it looks like or whatever. But I'm with you. I mean, a lot of them look cool.
Yeah.
So I
when they're joined together and
right.
configured, and they're, I don't know.
So I'd rather see something that is written to where, it is allowed in certain areas, but there are also restrictions.
I don't know if they would fit in a mobile home, only because of they're not, 40 foot. How long
Most
is a mobile home?
homes aren't very mobile either.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they build fences
A lot
around
of-
them and they don't go anywhere.
A lot of shipping containers are 8 to 9 feet wide, and they can be up to 53 feet long. So that some of them that you see that for the quote unquote tiny homes that are much smaller than that, but there are many shipping containers that are 53 feet long. So that's not.
But they're no larger than a double wide mobile home.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Right.
Not a single one, anyways.
True, now that you say that, because, anyway. Vice Chairman.
I have nothing against shipping containers being used as a home, provided, that they meet certain criteria. And that criteria is pretty extensive in terms of exterior look and interior finish and so on and so forth. And we do not have that in place within our city code. So I think that we should go ahead and approve this as written until such time as the staff and the city can get together and come up with criteria that would be acceptable for these containers to be used as a home on a residential lot within the city. And I say that because if you don't do that, then you're going to have all kinds of problems with possibly people bringing a container in and doing what they call their own idea of what this container should look like on a residential property. And that's going to tick off a lot of people. And once you don't have anything to protect the homeowners or the residential neighborhood that you're in, it's too late when that happens. So I would suggest that we vote for the prohibition and then have staff look into the possibility of what it would take to make a container used as a home, what the criteria would be to have that so it matches code. And I think that's the way to go with it. I have no problem. I've seen beautiful projects. If you watch these on TV, I mean, some of these container homes are fabulous. I'd love to live in one. But I do think that you have to have the standards and criteria in place before you would actually allow that to happen.
Understood. I did just want to speak a little bit. We have spoken internally somewhat about exactly what you're trying to get at as far as coming up with architectural guidelines. That is, I will say this not from experience, but from reading other municipalities, reading what they go through. That can be a very long, drawn-out process. Aesthetics are very subjective, and what one person thinks is great, another person thinks is terrible, and so we talked about that as well. But I just caution you making that recommendation that can be a long, drawn-out process and involve a lot of public input and things like that. And also, if it comes down to it at the end of the day that the shipping container basically has to look like a standard single-family home, that it doesn't pencil out basically there's no reason to purchase a shipping container if you have to make it look like a single-family home at the end of the day. I'm not arguing for or against what you're saying. I'm just making these points because we have discussed them internally, and those are things that come up. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer at this point. It's just that can be a slippery slope when you start talking about architectural guidelines, especially for single-family residences.
No, I agree with you, coming up with the standards for that, but I just cannot picture someone putting a container and just painting it and converting it into a residence. That would not be acceptable to me as a homeowner. And I think that if you're going to allow that, if that's going to be the consideration, then I would suggest to have a minimum of 1 acre or 1.5 acres at the very least, so that that container is not an eyesore to somebody who disagrees with the architectural look of a container.
Secretary Chambers.
Shipping containers. I think those things should only be used for residential where we have an emergency, where a tornado hits and blows down all the buildings and people don't have any place to stay, but temporarily. If we allow this, we're going to end up with some of the places I've seen down in New Orleans, another place, Shantytown. And I don't think Titusville will like to have a bandage put on their image where we have all these people running around these places of, like I said, shacks. And that's just about what it would end up being, too, if we allow it. So I think they only should be used when there's an emergency of some kind, and until we get that emergency over with, like floods or storms or something like that, and people, rather than be walking the streets, put them in there until their homes are built back up again. But to have an area where we have something like that, I don't think we'd be very happy with that. That's my opinion.
Okay. Vice Chairman Shavir.
Has staff done any research on these container homes in other cities, or codes or ordinances that these other places may have come up with some?
We have. There's kind of a mixed bag of some places allow them, some places have architectural guidelines and allow them if they meet certain requirements. Other places have just straight out banned them. And so from the research that we have done, and it wasn't a lot because council kind of gave us a very straightforward directive in this case, there wasn't one case that kind of prevailed over any other. I don't know that most cities are banning them versus just allowing them or having architectural guidelines. So I think because it's such a new topic that everyone's most jurisdictions are still trying to figure out exactly how they want to regulate them.
So what staff is recommending is that until such guidelines perhaps can be developed, that we're recommending that we prohibit these within the city limits. Is that correct?
That was the directive from council, was to create an ordinance that prohibits shipping containers as any kind of residential dwelling unit.
Trevor, do you have any knowledge of any citizen applying or requesting this type of use?
We did have one citizen interested in putting one of these shipping containers in. To my knowledge, we never received a formal building permit or anything like that. She had several questions about whether or not we do allow them or don't. Our response basically was, if we don't have any architectural guidelines, so if you can create a structure that meets the zoning requirements, meaning the setback, the minimum living area, and it meets the Florida Building Code, you could technically move forward. We don't have anything that currently would prohibit that. And this, if it's passed, would preclude that sort of development from happening.
So at present time, someone could put a container on a property. Is that correct?
It would probably be more than one. Most of the smallest minimum living area that we have for single family, for instance, is 900 square feet, which a single shipping container could not meet. However, if they bought 2 or 3 of them and put them together, that potentially could be permitted, yes.
And that's one reason why we have to go along with staff's recommendation until such time as guidelines can be put in place, I think, to establish some kind of criteria for the way architectural standards for the way these things look. I mean, if we don't do something, someone could, in fact, put several containers together, I suppose, and just put them on a residential lot. Is that correct?
I don't know, how would they be able to get an occupational permit?
Well, I'm assuming they could rig plumbing and electricity and do everything else at a home.
Like I said, if they can get them on the property, secure them, get them in a place that meets the Florida Building Code
And the minimum housing standards?
and the minimum housing standards, a certificate of occupancy can be granted for that structure because it meets all applicable codes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, we don't have anything we can't just say, no, you can't do that, absent of some sort of regulation that states that.
So just as an example, if we had a hurricane and several buildings were destroyed, someone could theoretically put a container on their property until such time they decide to replace, or if they decided to replace their
If a
structure.
property owner was going to use a structure as a residence, then they would need, and if it was larger than 120 square feet, they would need a building permit, and they would need to submit an application and tell the city what they're doing. So they couldn't just deposit it without application to the city for approval.
They would have the ability to do that, yes, but they would have to go through the proper permitting procedure before they could just drop one off and start occupying it.
But they would not have to meet any architectural standards, is that correct?
We don't have any architectural standards.
Okay. So they could just use a shipping container. As long as it was plumbed property, had the electricity meeting code standards, then they could just live in their container,
Correct?
even if it said railroad on it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I mean, you're really convincing on this. I'm not going to deny, you know.
I'm just bringing out all the good points.
But, I mean, I still believe that, you know, I've seen some of the things that can be done with this, and I would hate to see us just, but you're right. I mean, maybe when, I don't know. I don't want to get too far ahead and just say absolutely not. I don't like the fact that we're just saying absolutely not. No, I would prefer to say, you know, here's some guidelines, 5 acres of land, which, let's put it this way. So I was doing some of the figures on this, and houses are generally 75 on up per square foot, right? I mean, I guess we don't have realtors here, but anyway, and you can get a shipping container for less than 15 a square foot. And then you modify it. So then you're going up from there. And so there are some advantages to having some structural with shipping containers. Obviously, you have to do multiples and cut them out and join them. But I would never ever want to see something like this in residential clusters but you know, for 5 acres owned by itself, I mean, I've seen where people put up shacks. I mean, literally, it looks like they've put pallets together and they're living in. So, not here, but I'm just saying, travels throughout the country. it's hilarious on some of them, and actually might have been one of my family members, but I'm just saying that, to each his own, but I agree, you're right. I mean, until we get something in place, you're right. But I don't see that ever happening. I don't see there anything that would push this forward. And that's where I say, it'd be nice to just open the door to say, what if we said on residential estates, or I don't know, what's the 5 acre?
Residential estate is 1
but
acre, yeah.
What's the 5?
The only
Maybe they used to be 5.
GU allows 1 per
Is
5,
it-
I think.
per 3.
Or
GU allows 1 per 3, so I mean, that would be getting closer to 5. But the only area that requires 5 acres for a dwelling unit would be the open space and recreation zoning.
so, I'm just trying to think, trying to create a loophole, I guess, that
Well,
would
one
create
thing,
a possibility.
I will throw this out there that if the commission chooses that now is not the right time to allow these, but wants to offer recommendations to council that certain options should be explored, that could certainly be done. I mean, you can make a separate recommendation that while you don't think it's the right time now, you do think it's worthwhile to at least explore allowing them so in certain situations. I'm not going to recommend which situations those are. That's up to you all, but that's certainly within your purview.
So, the recommendation could be, we recommend that staff come up with, I don't know, I think that there's options. I don't know.
I think by doing a complete ban, it doesn't force being creative in what we should allow.
Right.
So I think that
That's my
we should,
fear
I
as
think
well.
that we should not approve this, and that we should ask, that we should recommend some, we came up with 2 or 3, in an emergency situation, as a temporary home, or in a place no smaller than 3 acres, or in a mobile, in an already approved mobile home park. Those are 3 examples right there that we're saying, that seems reasonable. So I just disagree with a full out ban, because I think once you have a ban, you're less likely to come up with options, because once their ban is there, it will just stay there.
Well, I agree with that, and I also wanted to ask, because it's not just shipping containers. I've seen programs where they use airplane fuselages and huge pipes and railroad cars and all kinds of things that they've turned into homes, and they're absolutely stunning and gorgeous. And personally, I wouldn't mind a bit to have that right next to me, but in a small neighborhood where the lots are really, really close, I can see where that's going to be an issue for, the other people in the neighborhood, and I wouldn't want to impose that on them. But it would be really amazing, I think, to have a whole small subdivision with all these different things, all these different types of homes in it. I think it would just be, I think it would be something people would really want to access and stay in and live in. So I agree, I wouldn't want a complete ban either for that reason.
Okay, hold on. Vice Chairman Shavir here.
Having said that, we know how human nature is, and we know what happens when we leave loopholes and back doors to this type of development. And what I would like to see, personally speaking, is that we know that we're going to have to develop a code for this type of structure, no matter how difficult it may be for that to happen. So until such time as staff comes up with some kind of guidelines for whether that's acreage size, lot size, visual effects, however this is going to work, whether it's going to have to meet, city, how will I say, sewer sanitation requirements and the whole 9 yards as a regular home. Until such time as staff comes up, then I think that we should prohibit this use. until such time as we have guidelines. If we don't have the guidelines and you're going to say, okay, we're going to allow this, then you just can't work that way. That's working backwards. What we should have in place is the standards that we will expect from this type of structure being in a residential neighborhood. And so we need to develop those standards first before we actually go ahead and approve something like this. And without those guidelines, you just open up a big door there, and people are going to be coming in, and I want this and that, and we're going to say, well, you allowed it. I mean, what's to stop it? Whether it's an empty lot next to your house. So I just feel like we should approve this as written, and maybe direct staff to look further into it and come back and say, let's see what we can do with this. I'm not opposed to the container as used for residential structure, but we certainly can't just leave it open-ended like this. I just think that would be a big mistake.
Well, I mean, you did want to speak, didn't you? And then
Oh,
sorry.
I think, really, that we should not do this because I don't care where you're in Titusville. I've been all over it since I've been here. I can't even think of a place where we could do something like that and the people would be up in arms. They would be in here and crowd sitting on top of each other if we allowed some kind of development around their homes. I know they would. They'd be screaming in the hall and bloody murder. Now, I can see where something like this would help out. Like I said, we had some kind of emergency, a flood or a hurricane blow down half the city or something like that. You got to put people someplace to get their homes built back up again. But just as a general thing, I really don't think so.
In terms of banning them, not banning them on a permanent basis, this isn't what's presented tonight, but it could be the recommendation of the council that rather than do an outright ban, that the city does a moratorium similar to what they did for medical marijuana to give staff time to explore these different kind of options and see. We're in the middle of the comprehensive plan update right now. We can certainly include policies that talk about inclusive types of housing, including affordable housing. A lot of times these units are more affordable because, as you said, they just cost less money, and things like that. And so that would give us time to, I feel, from a planning standpoint, properly address these from a comprehensive planning standpoint. And then later on, when we go back in the land development regulations and start updating those, get down into the details of what should they really look like, where are they appropriate, what are minimum lot sizes, all of those sorts of things. So that could be a recommendation that kind of I feel like would be a compromise of it prohibits them in the interim and gives staff adequate time to properly research them and come up with maybe one or more alternatives to present to the commission and to the city council and see what would be the best for the city as a whole.
I like that idea.
Vice Chairman.
Here again, as these shipping containers used for residents become more and more popular, and they are, what would happen if someone had a couple acres of land, okay, and came to the planning department and said, okay, I'm going to make a community of shipping container homes. This is what I'm going to do. What would you do about it right now?
As far as permitting multiple of these on one piece of property, they would have to go through the same subdivision requirements that any other subdivision would have to go through, including meeting minimum lot sizes and things like that. So as far as that goes, if you were to create a single-family subdivision, let's say, they would have to meet the same single-family standards as any other subdivision that's coming through right now. There could potentially be the possibility for a planned development. You've seen a couple of those here recently. However, the level of detail that goes into those is quite a lot. You would see the number of units, how close they are together, what amenities go along with them, and so you would have, in that case, the opportunity to really take an in-depth look at, is it appropriate, is it not, including is it compatible with the surrounding developments and those sort of things. So someone could potentially come in and ask for that now, but it wouldn't be it would be a blanket yes, go ahead and do it. It would have to follow the same procedures as any other development would at this point in time.
I'm trying to do a visual on this, right?
Sure.
Somebody has a couple of acres of land and say, hey, we're gonna bring these containers in and we're gonna rent them out. We're just gonna.
That I think would be difficult. In all honesty, based on our current regulatory environment that the city has, I can't think of a mechanism that would be an easy process that wouldn't involve some sort of public hearing process before this commission and the city council.
Well, we should, like I said, we shouldn't leave a back door open though. We need to make sure that. Like I said, I'm not opposed to these containers being used for homes. I really am not. And but I do think that we should have, before we approve something like this, that we should have some guidelines in place before we do that.
Understood. Well, I like your idea. I think a moratorium would be good until we can sort this out, because, here's it is very true that if we take a no stance from here, there's never ever any possibilities. Then again, we're not New York City. We don't have the population that, the articles that I've seen were in very populated areas, or Alaska, I guess, huh? But I'm just saying that I would like to, these can be pretty cool if done right. So putting some standards on them. But a moratorium I would be more comfortable with a moratorium than a ban, which essentially is the same thing. And then, I say, look, if we can't agree, without some serious effort, maybe then we should revisit this and then look at a ban. But that's my 2 cents.
Right, and passing a moratorium doesn't preclude you from later passing a ban if it turns out that just no one can agree and exactly, it's a temporary ban if you want to call it that. Basically, that's what it is. So, I think that based on the conversation that's been had, I think that would give us as staff time to review this and protect the city in the meantime.
But from a realistic standpoint, my perception is this council is just going to say, no, we want to ban them. So, all this could be very moot,
But it's your right to give them the recommendation of moratorium and condition the use in certain ways that you've discussed. And so I think that they should hear that.
Okay. Vice Chairman.
What would be the recommendation in terms of how long the moratorium should be in place?
I would recommend 6 months. That could be extended if necessary.
I think at the end of the day, it will be longer than 6 months, but I think 6 months is a very reasonable intro
If
period.
we said, what about a year? A year would be...
A year would be also reasonable, but, either of those two choices or somewhere in between would be acceptable to allow a moratorium in that time range. And council could decide that they want to look at it for 6 months or even a year, and then we would come back within that time frame. And if we don't have enough information to present an ordinance within that time frame, we would ask for an extension of the moratorium based on whatever reason that is, or to go ahead with the ban if that is what the information comes out to be.
So if we were to do, say, a year, in the interim, what would you folks, the planning department, be doing, knowing what our thinking is on?
Likely what we would do is do a much more in-depth research exercise as far as what else has been done in other jurisdictions, whether it's architectural guidelines or limiting them based on size or location or whatever it is, generate some options and then come back and get the input of the commission and city council at that point before we finalized any sort of ordinance. I wouldn't want to just dive right into a final product without getting some input first. And so that would likely be how I would approach this, but I think that's very reasonable to be done within a year time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any more discussion on this? So, given all the discussion, who would like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion I would like to motion for a moratorium on the shipping containers / other structures for residential use to allow staff to research ideas, and that's start with a 6 month.
For a period of?
6 months. with possible, extension.
Second.
Okay, well, quickly,
I would like to have this for a year instead of 6 months. I would like that to be a consideration to give staff more time and counsel, because by the time you start the process on that, it's going to take a couple of months, I think.
It will certainly take us, I think, a couple months to do some research and strategize some options. But as Chelsea mentioned, we can certainly come back, and if we have a few scenarios that we want to present and then need more time, we can certainly extend that moratorium for more than 6 months. And so I'm comfortable as a planning staff member with 6 months to start. I do think it will take longer than that overall, but I think 6 months is reasonable to get a start on it.
I withdraw.
okay. We take a vote on this?
Vice Chairman Shabir,
Yes.
Member Baker,
Yes.
Secretary Chambers,
Yeah.
Member Noel Copeland,
Yes.
Chairman Williams.
Yes, here's the problem I have, though, with this. So, good motion, but, so do we have to do anything else?
Yes, sir.
We still need action on the
Yes,
other item,
right.
yes.
So we
So I
never
make
took,
a motion that we reject
yeah, okay.
Okay.
what's been submitted. We reject the ban, I guess.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Can we take a vote on this?
Member Baker,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shabir,
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland,
Yes.
Secretary Chambers,
Yes.
Chairman Williams.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I just started thinking about that. I'm like, the motion was like, we could have, all right.
That's perfectly okay, though.
Backwards.
Okay. The last item, because as I said, we're withdrawing item E, that will be presented at a later date. Item F starts on page 62 in your packet. This is relating to restaurants and caterers as a conditional use in the planned industrial development zoning district. On October 24th, 2017, Council directed staff to develop an ordinance making catering a conditional use in the Planned Industrial Development PID zoning classification, based upon a request by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Pursuant to the proposed ordinance, restaurants which are accessory to a permitted use in PID would continue to be a limited use, but caterers and takeout restaurants would be approved as a primary use after obtaining a conditional use permit. And so basically, the way the code is currently written, let's say there's a large manufacturing use down in the industrial park, and as part of their operations, they have a little cafeteria that their employees can go and eat lunch in or something like that, but it's not really open to the public. That can be allowed as an accessory use to that overall manufacturing use. That would continue to hold true based on this proposed ordinance. However, if someone wanted to do like a catering facility, basically a big commercial kitchen where they cater food out to other areas, that would be a conditional use, and that was based upon a recommendation. I think the minutes are not in here, but that was based upon a recommendation that came from the Planning and Zoning Commission it's been several months ago now, whenever the regulations for restaurants in industrial were changed. That was a recommendation that came from the board, and so we are now following through on that and have drafted this ordinance to accomplish that. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, we'll open this to the public and close this to the public. Are there,
I don't think I understand. So I get the on-site kitchen. What's an example of the people that it wouldn't extend to?
So, for instance, if some, I'll just use the example that brought this up originally. There was someone who wanted to open up a catering business in the M1 zoning district, and the use started, but they expanded beyond what they were really permitted for originally. They started doing takeout food as well, which is different. It's different if you,
I understand.
prepare food and take it off
If somebody comes
site.
to get it, it's
Right.
different than if you're delivering it.
And so because of that, the council asked staff to change the regulations for takeout restaurants in our industrial zoning districts. Through that process, the Planning and Zoning Commission felt that because the PID, the Planned Industrial Development, is more of a kind of a high-tech, clean office park or industrial park environment, that having a takeout restaurant there could be problematic due to conflicts of traffic and those sorts of things. And so it was requested that in the PID district that if someone wanted to do a cater or a takeout restaurant, that be a conditional use rather than just an accessory use like a
Primary use.
a conditional primary use rather than just an accessory use on someone's property. And that was to give staff and the P&Z and council the ability to review traffic impacts and any kind of conflicts and things like
So
that.
I totally follow on the takeout portion, but I don't follow why you wouldn't allow a catering company that is a big kitchen preparing things that are going to go into a van and go somewhere different.
Understood. That's the direction.
Why would that not be allowed?
Okay, that's the direction we were given. That's
Okay.
what we did. So we just prepared the ordinance as was requested for,
Where
by the
currently,
P&Z.
where can a catering business that's straight catering?
We have allowed them before in M1 or M2, which are some of our other industrial zoning districts.
You good? Vice Chair.
So what we're saying here is caterers, okay, and takeout. Okay, so you could either have one or both of those uses in one building.
Potentially, you could. Or if you just had one or the other, regardless, they would require a conditional use permit
Okay,
as a primary use.
thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve XX 2018 relating to restaurants and caterers as conditional use in planned industrial development zoning.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, can we take a roll call on this?
Secretary Chambers,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Yes.
Member Baker,
Yes.
Member Noel Copeland,
No.
Chairman Williams.
Yes, and for the record, if you could state your reasons.
Sure, because I don't understand the inclusion of the catering company. That seems like it has no impact to the traffic flow, the reasons that are clear to me, you know, not allowing the takeout piece, but I don't understand the inclusion of the catering business in the ordinance.
Okay. All right, so that was the last one. Right? We missed the one. All right, so we'll go to reports. Did you have anything you'd like to report?
I don't have anything this week, no.
Okay. City Attorney.
Minor update, he's not here tonight, but on Tuesday's city council meeting, the council approved a new member, Errol Faison, will be joining this group, and at future meetings, he was unavailable to attend today. I spoke with him yesterday, and he's excited to join you all.
Good.
I do just have one thing, actually. If you haven't seen the signs and or any of the emails or flyers or anything like that, the city is hosting the opening of our section of the Coast to Coast Trail this weekend. The VIP event is Friday. The community bike ride and event is Saturday. It starts, I think Saturday starts at 10 a.m.
9, I'm volunteering.
9, okay. I'm volunteering as well. I just know I have to be here early, so.
There's going to be a group ride at all different lengths. You can ride the trail 5, 10, 20, 30, or 40 miles, and depending on how far you want to go, you should get there at the time. If you want more information, we can give that to you. You can find it on our website, but we're really looking forward to having a huge crowd, and an after party starts at noon. So if you want to come for that and see the trails and everyone that's there.
And the after party will be in Sandpoint Park.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. I'm in Jacksonville. So. All right. Member Harry, you have anything to report?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of things. If you remember last time, the clerk and Peggy discovered that the school board had not approved me for this year. And Dave Lindeman did not know that, and I didn't know it. And so the school board approved my appointment on February 13th. So that's not formally out yet, but it will be. So that's a minor thing.
Is that a 10-year appointment?
All right, Sean. The most important report is this. The sales surtax facility renewal projects involve 3 different good things for Titusville. And so the few items of interest to Titusville residents and school board members will vote on February 27th on 2 projects. Titusville High School Building 19 roof replacement, that's 1. 2 is Coquina Elementary Phase 1 purchase of mechanical equipment. And then additionally, the Brevard Public Schools are working on a project to correct failed stormwater structure, that is a pipe, in Titusville High School parking lot. These manifest as holes in the surface, so the project includes fixing the pipe and filling in the holes. All of the sales tax, surtax, security projects and getting finished up in the current time, he says. Also, Jackson Middle School is getting a roof replacement, and that work is going on right now. So we've got 3 schools affected, as I understand it, and a parking lot. And I go into that parking lot every Thursday to meet with my mentees, as do a lot of people from here. And the parking lot's kind of a mess. So I'm glad to see that it's going to be fixed.
Okay, is that
Okay,
it?
that's it.
Thank you. Member Noel Copeland,
Nothing to report.
Vice Chairman Shapiro,
No report.
Secretary Chambers,
Nothing for.
Member Baker. And I had a question. So I was looking at an article and I went on it a little bit more about algorithmic zoning. Did you guys see that?
I have not.
Okay, and then when I was looking at it, there's different, did you look at that? Oh, they should look it up, but, and what came to my mind was, when we were talking about the property on the airport, what actually happened with the property on the airport, that came before us?
Ultimately, that was denied
Okay.
by City Council, yes.
Okay, so, anyway, from first glance, the reason why I was talking about that was, it's just using different various things rather than set rules. And I imagine you guys will probably be, it doesn't look like it's anything you're going to be wanting to do anytime soon, but.
Did it happen to mention performance zoning at all in there?
Yeah, it's
okay.
It's over performance and,
Okay.
and points and.
Right. It's numbers and data driven more so than
Yeah,
uses and that
exactly.
sort of thing. Yeah.
And so I guess in my mind, I'm thinking of that piece of property there because it was a piece of property that really can't be developed, yet it was functional for something. Right. And anyway, I just thought you should look it up, and I never know, 20 years, you know, you guys will be saying, this is the latest and greatest thing, and we need to be doing this because everybody else is, and
I'll look into it.
so, all right, and that's it. So we are adjourned.